Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, it's never enough? Not for them, not for you? You've kept quiet to avoid conflict, said yes when you wanted to scream no, and smiled when you were breaking inside. And now, you barely recognize the person you've become. This isn't about being soft. This is about being invisible in your own life. But that ends here. Because the truth is, confidence isn't something you're born with, it's something you build, one hard choice at a time. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. You'll have to stop pleasing, start setting boundaries, and hold promises to yourself that you've broken 1,000 times. But that's the cost of becoming someone you actually respect. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you how to feel better. It teaches you how to be better. To act with discipline. To take control of the only thing that matters, your response. In this video, it's your wake-up call. We're going to walk through how to stop chasing approval and start becoming emotionally unshakable, brick by brick, habit by habit. If that's a journey you're ready for, hit subscribe and let's build it together. And before we begin, drop a comment below. What's one lie you've been telling yourself for too long? Say it out loud. Start honestly. That's where your self-respect begins. 1. Break the illusion of validation. It's a trap that weakens you. There's a silent war happening inside millions of minds every day, and most people don't even realize they're losing. It begins with something small, seemingly harmless. A post goes up, a photo, a story, and then nothing. No comments, no likes, just silence. Suddenly that silence feels louder than any insult. And in that silence, self-worth crumbles. You start asking the wrong questions. What did I do wrong? Am I not enough? Why don't they care? That's what happened to a friend of mine. She posted a picture she loved, something that made her feel confident for the first time in weeks. But when no one reacted, her entire mood shifted. Maybe I looked weird, she whispered. Maybe I should delete it. But here's what she didn't see. She had just handed her self-esteem to strangers, and they didn't even know it. That's the trap. The illusion of validation. The idea that you're only worth something when others reflect it back to you. And the truth is, it doesn't matter how strong you think you are. If you keep building your self-esteem on things outside your control, it will collapse the moment they stop clapping. The Stoics were brutally clear about this. What others think of you is not up to you. It never was. But how you see yourself, how you treat yourself, how you speak to yourself, that's your domain. That's your power. And yet most people give that power away daily, quietly, automatically. They check their phones first thing in the morning, not for information, but for affirmation. They scroll through carefully edited lives and then wonder why their reality feels small. They say yes when they mean no, just to avoid disappointing someone who wouldn't even notice if they disappeared. It's a dangerous loop. The more you chase external approval, the more your identity dissolves into who others want you to be. And soon, you no longer recognize your own reflection, because you're living someone else's story. Stoicism teaches that emotional resilience starts with detachment from opinions, from applause, from expectations. You don't need to hate praise, but you must never need it. True inner strength begins the moment you stop measuring your worth by response and start building it through intentional self-respect. You begin by watching yourself, by noticing the moments when you shrink just to be liked, when you apologize for existing, when you second-guess your decisions because someone didn't react the way you hoped, and you change, quietly, firmly. You start to act not for applause, but for alignment, with your principles, your standards, your truth. You post something because it matters to you. You speak up because silence would betray your values. You choose peace over popularity, and something shifts. At first, it feels lonely, because the noise stops. The fake compliments stop, the easy likes stop. But then something else appears, clarity. You begin to see who you really are when the performance ends. And you realize you don't need to impress anyone to matter. That's not arrogance, that's discipline, emotional discipline. You stop seeking validation and start seeking alignment. You build inner strength, not from what they say, but from what you choose. You develop quiet confidence, not loud, not performative, but unshakable. And the moment you do, people notice. Not because you begged for it, but because energy speaks louder than words. So next time you find yourself hesitating, waiting for feedback, ask yourself this: If no one ever applauded me for this, would I still do it? If the answer is yes, do it. That's integrity. That's self-worth. That's the root of unbreakable self-esteem. And it begins the moment you decide that being respected by yourself matters more than being liked by everyone else. 2. Reclaim your mind from old wounds and voices. Some people think low self-esteem just happens, whether it's random or part of someone's personality. But if you look closer, it almost always has a history. And often that history doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the voices you inherited. Maybe it was a parent who never gave you credit, only criticism. Maybe it was a teacher who told you you're just not that kind of student. Maybe it was silence, being ignored when you needed to be seen. These aren't just memories. Over time, they become scripts, and you start repeating them without even realizing it. I once had a neighbor, Mr. Robert, a kind, soft-spoken man. His daughter excelled in school, top of her class, scholarships lined up, but every time someone praised her, he would deflect. "She's lucky. Not sure where she got it from. I was never much." One day, I asked him why he always downplayed her success. He paused and said, "My father used to say I'd never amount to anything. Guess I started believing it." That hit me hard. Because that's what happens to most people. We carry the echoes of past voices like they're the present truth. And the danger is, those voices don't just stay in your past, they show up in how you treat yourself every single day. They whisper, "You're not good enough," when you try something new. They remind you of your flaws the moment you feel proud. They say, "Don't try too hard. You'll just fail like last time." And slowly, they become your inner dialogue. But here's what Stoicism teaches us. Pain is real, but suffering is optional. You don't get to choose everything that happened to you, but you do get to choose the meaning you give it now. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's where the healing begins. Not in changing the past, but in reclaiming your power to tell a new story. The story doesn't need to be about blame. It needs to be about responsibility. Because as long as you keep repeating the same emotional script, you remain trapped in someone else's belief system. That's not self-awareness. That's self-abandonment. So what do? You start by noticing the voice. The next time you hear, "I can't do this," or "I'm not enough," pause. Ask yourself, whose voice is this really? Where did I learn that I had to earn love? Where did I pick up the belief that I must be perfect to be worthy? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're the doorway to freedom. Because when you locate the origin of the belief, you can start separating from it. You realize that was their limitation, not your truth. And in that space of awareness, you can choose a different voice, your own. This isn't about toxic positivity. You don't heal inner wounds by chanting affirmations you don't believe. You heal by facing the root of the wound with clarity and compassion. And then, step by step, you retrain your inner dialogue. You speak to yourself not as a critic, but as a coach. Not with shame, but with honest discipline. You say, "Yes, I was hurt. Yes, I used to believe that, but today I choose something different." You rewrite the old lines. You replace "I'm broken" with "I'm rebuilding." You replace "I always fail" with "I'm learning every day." And when you fail again, and you will, you don't spiral. You speak with the voice you've trained. "This is hard, but I can handle it." That's not self-help fluff. That's self-leadership. And it's how unshakable self-esteem is born. Not from pretending the past didn't happen, but from refusing to let it define your present. There's a kind of power that only comes when you stop blaming the voices that shaped you and start becoming the voice that frees you. You don't need permission. You don't need an apology. What you need is to look in the mirror and say, "I get to decide what I believe about me now." That moment, right there, is when you take your mind back. And once you do, no one can take it from you again. 3. Self-esteem is discipline, not feeling. Most people wait to feel confident before they take action. But the truth is that feeling rarely comes, and when it does, it never stays. That's because self-esteem isn't something you feel your way into. It's something you earn through disciplined action. Real self-worth is not about hype, motivation, or bursts of inspiration. It's about what you consistently do, especially when no one is watching. I saw this firsthand with someone I care about. She used to beat herself up every time she failed to wake up early and write. "I just don't have the motivation," she'd say, frustrated with herself. She kept waiting for the right energy, the perfect morning, the feeling of readiness, but it never came. Then one day she decided to drop the pressure. Instead of writing a full page or finishing a story, she told herself, just write 3 sentences every morning, no matter what. And she did. Not perfectly, not poetically, just 3 sentences. After a week, something shifted. She wasn't proud of the content, she was proud of the consistency. That's when she realized she didn't lack motivation, she lacked follow-through. And that follow-through was what gave her a new kind of self-respect. Not flashy, not loud, but steady. That's what Stoicism teaches. Virtue isn't a mood, it's a habit. And discipline is its sharpest tool. If you want to build unshakable self-esteem, stop chasing emotional highs and start mastering your behaviors. Because every time you say you'll do something and actually follow through, you cast a vote for a new identity, one built on self-trust. The mistake most people make is thinking they have to feel confident before they act. But confidence is the byproduct of alignment. When your actions match your values, when your choices match your standards, your confidence grows. Not because you willed it into existence, but because you proved it to yourself. That's how quiet confidence is formed. Not through constant self-affirmation, but through discipline. You don't even need to talk about it. Think about it. Every broken promise to yourself chips away at your self-image. You tell yourself you'll start eating better. You don't. You say you'll speak up next time. You don't. You promise to stop letting toxic people take your peace. And yet there you are, replying again. These aren't just failures of habit. They're micro-fractures in identity. And over time, they form the belief that you can't trust yourself. That's when self-esteem collapses. Not because you're weak, but because you've given yourself too much evidence that your word doesn't mean much. But the opposite is also true. Each small promise you keep, getting up on time, finishing the task you said you would, showing up to the gym even when it's raining, each one is a declaration that you respect your own boundaries. And the more you do that, the stronger your self-image becomes. Not in theory, in reality. Self-discipline becomes emotional resilience. You stop overanalyzing, stop needing validation, stop second-guessing everything. You move with quiet power, not because you're perfect, but because you're consistent. And that consistency, no matter how small, compounds. It builds mental toughness, it builds emotional resilience, it builds the kind of self-esteem no insult, no rejection, no setback can destroy. So if you're waiting to feel confident before you move, stop. Choose a small action and make it non-negotiable. Not because it'll change your life overnight, but because it'll change how you see yourself. And that shift is everything. One act of follow-through is more powerful than 1,000 positive thoughts. And every time you repeat that act, you're reprogramming your identity. You're becoming someone you can count on. And that's the foundation of unbreakable self-esteem. Not hype, not feelings, but discipline. Daily, quiet, deliberate discipline. Because when the world shakes you, it's not your mood that keeps you steady, it's your habits. Your inner strength isn't built in moments of excitement. It's forged in routines no one else sees. So stop asking, do I feel like it? Start asking, will I respect myself if I don't? That's where the real transformation begins. For accept what you can't change and master what you can. One of the most damaging lies we tell ourselves is that we must become someone else to be worthy. That if we could just look a little different, talk a little smoother, stand a little taller, then we'd finally feel confident. But that mindset will keep you stuck for life, chasing a version of you that doesn't and shouldn't exist. I remember a colleague who struggled with this for years. He was sharp, hardworking, and a great speaker. But every time we walked into a boardroom, I could see it in his body language. He shrank a little. Later, over coffee, he admitted it. I've always felt small, literally. Back in school, I was always the shortest. People joked about it. I still hear those voices when I stand next to taller guys. I feel like I don't measure up. But then he paused and said, I can't grow taller, but I can grow stronger here, pointing to his head. And I can sharpen how I speak, how I think, how I lead. That's mine to build. That's when I knew he was starting to win. Because real self-esteem doesn't come from fixing every flaw. It comes from choosing where to focus your power. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They taught that peace isn't found in changing the world to match your desires. Peace is found in adjusting your expectations to match reality. It's not resignation. It's clarity. When you accept what you cannot change, you stop wasting energy fighting reality. And that energy, you can finally use it to master what is in your control. Your discipline, your perspective, your character. That's not just empowering, it's freeing. Too many people waste years hating things they can't undo, their past, their family, their appearance, their voice. But the truth is, your self-worth doesn't rise when you erase those parts. It rises when you stop treating them like reasons to be ashamed. You don't have to love every part of yourself to stop fighting it. You just have to decide it no longer gets to define you. That shift alone reclaims massive emotional energy. And now, you can reinvest that energy into building something better. You can work on your speech, you can train your body, you can grow your knowledge, you can refine your boundaries. These are not small things. These are weapons. These are tools of transformation. But they only work when you stop wasting time wishing you were someone else. Because the longer you resist who you are, the longer you delay who you could become. One of the most powerful acts of emotional resilience is to stand in front of the mirror and say, I don't need to be flawless to be valuable. I don't need to change everything to start respecting myself. This isn't about giving up on improvement. It's about choosing your battles wisely. The man who accepts his height can now walk tall in his words. The woman who accepts her scars can now stand proud in her strength. The person who stops wishing for a different past can finally focus on building a better future. That's not surrender. That's self-mastery, and it's the foundation of lasting self-esteem. When you internalize that some things simply are, and that they don't get to define your worth unless you let them, you finally step into control. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. You don't fight the rain, you learn how to walk through it without losing your peace. And that's what makes you powerful, because the world isn't impressed by perfection. It's drawn to people who own their reality without apology and still rise with discipline, grace, and clarity. So today, ask yourself, what have I been wasting energy trying to change? What would happen if I accepted it fully? And what could I do with all that freed up energy? You'll realize that what you thought made you less was never the problem. The problem was believing it had the right to hold you back. Accept what you can't change, master what you can. That's not just a mindset, that's a turning point. And that's where the most unshakable version of you begins. 5. Choose environments that reflect your worth. Confidence doesn't just come from inside, it also depends on where you plant yourself. You could be strong, smart, and full of potential, but if you're constantly surrounded by people who mock your dreams or minimize your growth, your self-esteem begins to shrink. Not because you're weak, but because the soil is toxic. I saw this with my cousin. For years, she hung around the same group of friends she'd known since high school. It felt familiar, safe even, but every time she opened up about something she wanted to pursue, starting a blog, learning coding, applying for a new role, she was met with sarcasm. That's a bit much, don't you think? Or stick to what you know. At first, she laughed it off, but over time she started speaking less. She second-guessed herself. She stopped trying. And then one day, she left the group chat and never looked back. A few months later, she joined a local meetup on digital skills. She wasn't the loudest in the room, but for the first time, she felt heard. And that changed everything. Not because people hyped her up, but because they respected her process. That's what most people don't realize. Your self-worth isn't just about how you treat yourself. It's about who you allow to echo inside your mind. The Stoics were clear. Protect your mind. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit. What he meant is simple. No one can shape your internal world unless you give them access. So ask yourself, who are you giving access to? Look around. Are your daily environments, your friends, your social media feed, your group chats, your workplace, reflecting your worth or eroding it? Because even small doses of disrespect, repeated enough, create internal doubt. And what begins as subtle discomfort, maybe they're joking, can quickly become deep-rooted insecurity. Maybe they're right. But here's the truth. Not everyone deserves a front row seat in your life. Just because someone has known you the longest doesn't mean they know you best. And just because someone is close doesn't mean they're good for you. One of the most powerful acts of emotional resilience is creating distance from what dims your light. That doesn't mean dramatic confrontations. It means quietly stepping back, talking less, sharing less, removing yourself from spaces where you feel like you have to shrink to be accepted. Because the more you adjust who you are to fit into a place, the more you lose sight of who you are. And the longer you stay, the deeper the damage. You weren't born to be tolerated. You were born to grow, to contribute, to rise. But to do that, you need to be somewhere that supports your roots. Somewhere that doesn't make you apologize for dreaming big or wanting more. So if you've been feeling emotionally drained, unsure, or disconnected, don't just look inward. Scan the room. Sometimes the problem isn't your mindset. It's your environment. It's not your fault if people around you can't see your value. But it is your responsibility to stop sitting at tables where you're constantly being served doubt. Change your surroundings, and you'll see how quickly your self-image begins to heal. You'll start to speak with more clarity. You'll walk with a little more confidence. You'll stop asking for permission to believe in yourself. Because real growth is contagious. And when you're around people who are building, who listen without judgment, who challenge without ridicule, you begin to rise without even trying. The energy shifts. Your standards rise, and your self-worth stops being something you have to protect. It becomes something your environment reinforces. That's the quiet power of alignment. You no longer need to over-explain who you are. You just are. And in the right place, that's more than enough. So today, choose carefully. Choose spaces where you can grow. Choose people who reflect the version of you that you're becoming, not the one you're trying to outgrow. Because self-respect isn't just about looking in the mirror. It's about where you choose to stand and who you choose to stand next to. Choose wisely. Your future self will thank you. 6. Celebrate your wins, out loud and without shame. One of the quietest ways people destroy their self-esteem is by downplaying their own progress. It doesn't show up as self-hatred. It hides behind a shrug, a nervous laugh, a soft, "it was nothing." But that simple habit, rejecting recognition, slowly conditions your brain to believe you've done nothing worth celebrating. Last week I watched it happen again. A coworker had just passed a tough internal evaluation. Everyone congratulated him. He'd worked for it, prepared for it, earned it. But when the praise came, he deflected. "It was just luck. I think I got lucky this time." I wanted to stop him right there and ask, if you don't allow yourself to own this moment, how will you ever believe you deserve something bigger? But the truth is, many people have internalized the idea that accepting praise is arrogance. That if you say thank you instead of, "oh, it was nothing," you're being full of yourself. Yet what's really happening is much worse. You're rejecting your own effort. You're reinforcing a belief that your wins don't count. And over time, this shapes your self-image into something fragile and blurry. Stoicism doesn't encourage ego, but it doesn't promote invisibility either. The Stoics taught humility as awareness, not as self-denial. To know your strengths is not arrogance, it's clarity. And clarity builds confidence. When you hide your progress out of fear that you'll seem proud, you rob yourself of momentum. Because what you don't acknowledge, your brain doesn't register. Every small step, every hard-won improvement, every challenge you overcame silently, it all deserves recognition. Not for applause, but for alignment. Confidence doesn't grow from fantasies. It grows from data. It grows from evidence. And if you're constantly deleting that evidence because you're afraid of appearing too self-assured, you're giving your mind nothing to work with. Think of self-esteem like a bank account. Every time you acknowledge a win, no matter how small, you make a deposit. But every time you say it was nothing, you cancel the deposit. Do that enough times, and you go emotionally bankrupt. On the other hand, imagine what changes when you simply say, "thank you." When someone compliments your work. Or when you take 5 minutes to write down something you handled well this week. Or when you look in the mirror and say, "that wasn't perfect, but I showed up." These are not acts of ego, they're acts of internal grounding. Because the more you reinforce your progress, the more your mind starts to believe, maybe I am growing, maybe I do deserve to feel proud. That belief creates a shift. You start to carry yourself differently. Speak with more ease. Stand firmer when things get hard. You stop waiting for others to validate you because you've been practicing doing it yourself. And when you do that consistently, your emotional resilience expands. You're no longer shaken by silence or rejection because your self-image isn't built on applause, it's built on self-recognition. But here's the catch. No one will teach you how to do this. In fact, most cultures reward false humility more than quiet confidence. You'll be praised for shrinking, for staying silent, for hiding your light. But that praise is poison, because it teaches you to disconnect from your own strength. So you must choose differently. Choose to honor your efforts. Not to brag, not to prove anything, but because your growth deserves to be seen first by you. When someone says, "Well done," say thank you. Don't shrink, don't deflect. Let it land. Let it register. Let it build. Because if you can't learn to celebrate your wins, you'll keep moving the finish line. You'll keep telling yourself that it's not enough yet, that you'll feel proud one day when it's perfect. But that day never comes. Because self-worth doesn't wait for milestones. It's built in moments, imperfect, quiet, and deeply real. So today, look at where you've been holding back from owning your growth. What's one thing you've done recently that deserves recognition? Say it, write it, hold it, because every time you do, you plant a seed. And over time, those seeds grow into something unshakable, a self-image rooted in truth. One that doesn't need to shout, but also one that no longer hides. Building unbreakable self-esteem isn't a gift you wait for. It's a quiet choice you make, every single day. Through every small action, every mental shift, every time you choose emotional discipline over self-doubt, you reclaim your worth. This isn't about chasing applause. It's about learning how to protect your peace, stop seeking validation, and live from your inner strength. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. You just need to show up for yourself. Consistently, honestly, and without shame. If there's one lesson to walk away with, it's this. Your self-worth isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in silence. In the way you speak to yourself, in the habits you choose, in the boundaries you set. You're allowed to grow slowly. You're allowed to start again. And most importantly, you're allowed to choose you. Now, it's your turn. In the comments below, share one small win you're proud of, something you usually keep to yourself. Let's normalize quiet confidence and self-respect. And if this video spoke to you, don't forget to like it, subscribe for more Stoic insights, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your story might be the spark someone else needs to reclaim theirs.